Wasabi guys, welcome back to another 10 underrated commander cards video. For this one, I'm going to be showing you 10 underrated multicolor enchantments. I think the multicolor aspect is what's really going to help this stand out, because between colors you get a lot of obscure abilities, you get a lot of weird, but yet fun and interesting cards. Some of these are even on the reserve list, and I'll be sure to point those out when we get to them. First one I want to show you is Enchanted Evening. If you like Mycosynth Lattice and you understand why that card is so powerful, imagine a future where we get even more enchantment support that could interact with this card. For 5 mana, you do effectively the same thing, but for enchantments. So if you have a way to easily manipulate the destruction of enchantments, playing some type of one-sided enchantment removal spell that happens to wipe out all of your opponent's enchantments, I think could be very powerful. It's not an expensive card because, of course, between enchantments and artifacts have the better interactions. Like with many underrated cards, like with many cards that I think are good pickups, time is a factor you should consider potential support in the future, and just how that would affect any of these cards in the video. Then we have Devscape. This is a playgroup favorite, because all it is, it's a fun card that can lock certain opponents out of playing the game if they rely heavily on non-creature cards. It's not 100% oppressive like a lot of cards that shut your opponents down tend to be, because you are giving them 1/1 birds in exchange. This goes back to what I was just saying with Enchanted Evening. It's not so much about what the card is right now, but the potential to continue building around it in the future makes it incredibly interesting for people like me. 6 mana is a bit expensive to do something like this. We are getting to the point in Commander where you have to consider constant power creep. Spells need to be cheaper, you need to get instant benefits, but I still like this as just something for casual Commander fun. Then we have Vile Consumption from Invasion. Blue-black, all creatures have at the beginning of your upkeep sacrifice this creature unless you pay 1 life. So it's a worse Tabernacle, because instead of mana they do pay life. And life is a pretty abundant resource in Commander. However, I do like that it is only 3 mana. We were just talking about costs being too expensive. I like this as a mid to late game play to apply more pressure on your opponents. Most of the time, they're going to be choosing the life, so you want to use this on your opponents who have massive board presences. There are a lot of people who still play commanders like Krenko, where the whole purpose of their decks is to be aggressive, is to try to get as many goblins out there. When they are doubling their board presence every turn, they're going to have to make some pretty big sacrifices if they want to remain in the game without losing too much life. Next, we have Anthem of Rakdos. I remember seeing this card a couple months ago, and I told myself I needed to make a separate video about it because it's another great, underrated enchantment from Dissension that I think could be useful in a lot of commander decks today. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +2 power until end of turn, and unfortunately the Anthem does deal 1 damage to you for each creature. I still like the idea of going wide and having a bunch of creatures with +2 power. The Hellbent is also really nice because it's another damage doubler that we get in these colors. While I don't like being encouraged to have an empty hand, I do like that there is at least an upside that if we want to throw a Hail Mary pass, if we want to try to win the game all at once, all we need to do is empty our hand. This adding on to other replacement effects and just the total damage you're able to deal is very appealing, even though it is another 5 mana enchantment. 5+ mana, you want to get some power out of it. I think you do get some power here. Next, we have Overabundance from Invasion, another Invasion enchantment. This time in Gruul we have, whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 additional mana to their mana pool of the same type, and then it deals 1 damage to that player. Which again, I like how this is more of an acceleration card. It's meant to speed up the game, kind of like with Vile Consumption. You want to apply pressure, you want to make it feel like at any turn now, some player is going to jump out ahead. And Overabundance is meant to benefit the players who have the most lands, making it even easier for them to win the game, although this is dealing damage to them each time they do that. Also like that, again, it's another 3 mana enchantment. You are getting into that sweet spot of where spells are more competitive. You don't want to have to wait several turns in order to play something that's going to try to help you win the game. Then we have Hunting Grounds from Judgment. If you like Carador, Ghost Chieftain, any type of green and white deck, where you're going to have a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, I like this a lot. It basically allows you to free cast creatures from your hand whenever an opponent plays a spell, the condition of course being that you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So with that deck in green and white, you're already filling your graveyard with a bunch of creatures. You could also use Tayam. The fact that this is only 2 mana is even sweeter. We are at the point in Commander where something like this maybe was a bit more difficult in the past, not exactly consistent or reliable, but now it's incredibly easy to get that off. We have so many ways of filling our graveyard, it's not even funny. Then we have another 2 mana green and white enchantment, Wheel of Sun and Moon. This aura enchants a player if a card would be put into enchanted player's graveyard from anywhere. Instead, that card is revealed and put on the bottom of that player's library. So this is going to sit out there. They have to deal with it at some point. This is really appealing to me because we see a ton of cards that are used to hate on graveyard decks, specifically when creatures go to the graveyard from the battlefield. This goes a step further. It's not just creatures, of course. It's any card, and it can hurt mill decks. It can hurt Spellslinger decks. That's why Sir Conrad was so strong. It's that you have several ways of triggering off of him, because creatures could go to the graveyard by different means. You can have them mill, you can have them discard. There's so many ways of benefiting off of those interactions that I like that this goes a step further than the typical hate on creatures dying route. Again, only 2 mana, and it's an aura, makes it easy to search up in those decks that care about auras and enchantments. Surprised I haven't really seen it that often in Commander. Next we have a reserved list card, but it's not an expensive reserved list card, it's Righteous War from Visions. I love everything about this. I love the artwork. Black and white's my favorite color combo, and what this card does is just absolutely ridiculous. All white creatures you control gain protection from black, and all black creatures you control gain protection from white. Here's a thought, just play black and white creatures so that they get protection from both. Downside, of course, you can't target your own creatures with sources that are black or white, but who really cares? The main upside here is that you're going to be able to swing in uncontested at opponents who have entirely white, black, or white and black creatures, and they're targeting removal, which is, again, black and white. It's the reason why Animar was so strong. You're not really going to be able to do much against our creatures, seeing as a lot of the best targeting removal spells are black or white. It's only 3 mana, you're not investing that much for this type of protection. Wish it saw way more play in Commander. And then we have another reserve list card in Grim Feast from Mirage. Golgari this time at the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to you. Whenever a creature is put into an opponent's graveyard from play, you gain an amount of life equal to that creature's toughness. All we care about here is mass life gain. You are in black, so you have access to a lot of creature board wipes, so kill off your opponent's creatures, gain a massive amount of life. The beginning of our upkeep trigger is really not that big of a deal when you consider you're gaining a bunch of life in a multiplayer game off of each of your opponent's creatures. And then finally, the last enchantment to talk about today is Chromaticore from Born of the Gods. The only creature in the video, but it is technically an enchantment. I love Bestow, and I think this is probably one of the best Bestow creatures, if not the best. Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink, and a 4/4. That's it. If you don't bestow it, for 5 mana you get very good stats, very good combat-related keywords. But for only 2 generic mana more, give Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink to another creature and +4/+4. And you might be thinking, well, that's cool and all, but you're just making one creature really big and giving it a lot of good keywords. That's still good in Commander, but if that wasn't enough to sell you on the card, the most underrated thing about Bestow is that if anything were to happen to the enchanted creature, let's say it gets exiled, it goes to the graveyard by any means, you still get Chromaticore. When it falls off of the creature, it becomes a creature again itself. That is the reason why I hope we get more Bestow cards in the future. If we've given all the support in the world to artifact strategies up to this point, let's add some depth, let's add some variety to enchantments, and even auras more specifically. This is the way to do it. I really think that this is an ability that needs to come back, and Chromaticore is an example of just how powerful that can be. So if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed these, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate it. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.